All right, Captain Marvel, or as I like to call it, J.J. Abrams' Supergirl. Because honestly, this movie felt a lot like a J.J. Abrams film. Specifically, sort of in the way it's plotted. And by that, I mean, in a lot of J.J. Abrams films, he does this. He likes to do this thing called the mystery box, where he sets up a mystery that's really only meant to pay off a long time down the line. And the mystery most of the time ends up not being very much anything significant. The best example I can give recently here is the Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens. He spends a lot of time sort of setting up these mysteries surrounding what's happening in Star Wars The Force Awakens, only for him to not really get resolved until the next movie, and like not in the way a lot of people like it. And that's just usually the way he operates, where he thinks of some grand mystery and just sort of just sort of waits until later to pay it off, and he really doesn't have any idea what he's doing. It's really meant to excite the audience first and foremost. So Captain Marvel's mystery is an identity crisis. The movie is about this Air Force pilot. Her name is Carol Danvers. I mean, if you know anything about the comic, then you're pretty much familiar with that fact. And God, I just realized I'm spoiling it. Oh well. So the movie itself starts off with this chick. She's working for the Kree Empire because every comic book and comic book based movie has to have like these stupidest sort of sci-fi name ever. And sort of she gets caught by the Kree's sort of mortal enemy. They're fighting this war against the species known as the Skrulls. And the Skrulls have the ability to turn into anything they see, right down to their DNA. And like, the only way you can tell a Skrull apart is if you make them recall their memories, and if they can't remember far back enough, then they're a Skrull. This ultimately doesn't amount to that much, though. But we'll get to that later. So Carol ends up basically getting captured by them, and then she breaks free. She fights the Skrulls, and then she lands in Los Angeles circa 1995. And it's there where the movie mostly takes place. The movie starts out very much feeling like a sci-fi movie. Like, it's very reminiscent of like older sci-fi shows like Star Trek, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Babylon 5, Battlestar Galactica. Very much that kind of feel before sort of turning out into being more of a character drama isn't the right word, but honestly, I'm feeling like that's the closest approximation to what this movie is going to be. One of the problems I have with this movie is that it never really nails down a very consistent tone. So, we have a movie that's an epic sci-fi, but also a very grounded superhero action movie, and also has sort of that Marvel trademark humor. And most of the time, it doesn't really land. I mean, occasionally it does, but so sort of what happens is Carol is found by Nick Fury, who at the time is not the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. I don't even know if he's the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. in like the current timeline. I mean, the case is, he's starting off. He's a lot more skeptical of like sort of the ongoings of the MCU. He doesn't believe in like aliens or ghosts or anything. And then he meets Carol, he meets the Skrulls, and then suddenly, they both want to team up. And that's sort of where the movie goes from there. And the main drive of the movie, at least in the first two acts, is them solving the mystery of where Carol came from exactly. Because, and you see this a lot in trailers as well, is that she is a Kree soldier. She's practically an alien to everybody who meets her. But as we later find out, and the trailers spoil this, is that she's actually from Earth. And a lot of the movie is mostly we find this out early on that she's from Earth, but then we spent a long time just sort of wondering what happened in between the time she left Earth and how she ended up on the Kree homeworld. And honestly, it's kind of lame. I don't even know how to quite describe it, but it doesn't have the emotional impact that I feel like it was supposed to. And God, this is where I get into spoilers, and I don't want to quite yet, so we'll hold off here for a sec, and I want to talk about the good. And the good is that the movie is set in the 90s, and it's such a sort of unique thing for Marvel. They did do a period piece before, with Captain America, the First Avenger. That took place in World War II, but it was more of a sort of romanticized World War II. It was heavily based off the early Marvel comics. The movie setting is a lot more grounded. It's a lot more in line with, sort of the phase 2 and 3 of the MCU. But except the style, the music and the style is definitely the strongest part. You have Carol Danvers wearing a 9 Inch Nails t-shirt, and that's pretty rad. And, she listens to Garbage, the band Garbage, not actual Garbage music. Fucking Nirvana plays at one point. At another point in the movie, this happens early on, she's trying to contact her sort of squad, led by Jude Law. He's actually pretty good, by the way. I'll get to the acting in a bit, but she's trying to make a call in front of a phone booth, and it's covered in posters for the Smashing Pumpkins and Bush. And as a fan of 90s grunge, I definitely got a kick out of those references. And that's probably the best part of the movie, is just sort of how much fun they have with the whole 90s presentation, the aesthetic. And sort of the lamer parts of the movie are where that sort of floats away from that a little bit. I know for the most part I like the movie, but I think it's on the lesser tier of the MCU. That's kind of a shame, because I think where it goes ultimately, it sets up a lot of potential for the sequels. It's just that this first movie is kind of flat, and I blame that pretty solely on the directors. So I just Googled this here. So the directors are Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, and they were mostly taken off the indie scene, and that's what Marvel has been doing. They take a lot of indie directors and sort of bump them up. That's what happened to James Gunn. That's what happened to Ryan Coogler. The Russos weren't indie directors, but they were mostly TV directors. and that ended up being a really strong pick. But unlike Kugler and Gunn, uh, they both made like really interesting and unique movies on the indie scene. Gunn especially. Kugler really only had one movie on the indie scene, but was so good. It made sense that any movie studio would have cut him a check for literally anything. That's how he ended up directing a Rocky movie and Black Panther. But Bowden and Fleck are definitely the kinds of directors who make like what's the typical indie movie. It's a quiet, small drama, mostly between characters. They're probably most famous for directing the 2010 adaptation of It's Kind of a Funny Story, and that was one of my favorite books. And I never really liked the movie for God, I forgot. It just I never thought it like worked that well as a movie. But their sort of expertise is in that sort of small, intimate drama. And when the movie gets there, at times, that's when it works the strongest. And I think the strongest aspect, besides the 90s presentation, is sort of how sort of the character interactions here. There's really only four main characters. One of them doesn't really appear until the third act, so you pretty much have Brie Larson as Carol / Captain Marvel. We'll get to her. Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson. He's really good. This is definitely the most involved he's been in. Most of the time he's sort of relegated as a side character or like a mentor sort of figure. But here he's one of the main stars, and I think he really kills it. And they use some of that technology they did to make what was his name? The guy who played Hank Pym in Ant-Man. It's Michael Douglas. I know that for a fact. I'm gonna look this up. The technology they use to make Michael Douglas look younger, they did that throughout the entire movie. It looks really good. You can tell No, it doesn't look obviously CG, although the CG is a problem. We will get to that. I keep saying that a lot, but I want to be positive here. This is the positivity section. Man, who else is in that movie? Monica Rambeau. God. Nah. God. I gotta look up the cast here since I probably should have did that. Samuel L. Jackson is good. Jude Law, I think, is pretty good. He doesn't have a lot of enough screen presence to sort of like really make an impression, but Jude Law is always a good actor. Fucking Lee Pace is Ronan. Ronan the fucking destroyer or whatever from Guardians of the Galaxy. He's in this for absolutely no reason. He's in this to sort of provide a fact that he is a bigger fish, and I don't know, like there was no reason to be in here, like at all. Lashana Lynch, I really liked her a lot. She plays Carol's best friend and a fellow Air Force pilot. And I felt like she was the best part of the show. She's badass. She's really cool. And she has a daughter, too. And I forgot, like, who played her. But she was also really good in that movie as well. Sort of this young kid who's, like, really interested in, like, science and all that. And, like, I was trying to figure out, like, the entire time who she would grow up into. And I guess I'll finally get into spoilers here. Like, she doesn't. So So this movie is a prequel, very much like. I mean, Captain America technically takes place before this movie, but this movie definitely feels like the origin point of the MCU as we know it. This is definitely where the Earth is sort of introduced to all the weird shit that would go on to become a staple in the MCU. You know, specifically aliens, you know, weird technology. You know, Carol's sort of a mentor figure, who, by the way, is based off a comic book character, but you would never know unless you picked it up. And I guarantee a lot of fanboys are going to be pissed at this aspect, but whatever. Oh, where was I going with this? God, this is what happens when I do something off the cuff and unscripted. I just sort of pause for a bit. But, you know, whatever. This is going to be one long take here. I don't give a shit. But, yeah, and spoilers, again, this is sort of where Nick Fury gets the idea to start the Avengers. And, so this is definitely, like, episode 0 of the MCU. Like, it definitely feels like this is supposed to be, like, the origin point of everything. I know some movies, I know Captain America took place before, but that was, like, very squarely focused on that character and, like, the look and feel. And, like, that really only started his individual arc, while Captain Marvel definitely feels more significant to that aspect of the universe in a lot of ways. So, yeah, this definitely was made with the intention of being the episode 0. You know, in between, like, the grand 2-part finale, but whatever. Better late than never. So, but, you know, sort of as a prequel, it does a lot of prequel baiting, as I like to call it. I didn't coin the term, but I'm going to use it this way. Where in a prequel, they will make references to things that come after as sort of a setup. And most of the time, like, it's fun to see, but it also feels so ham-fisted and inorganic. You know, it sort of takes you out of the film itself. And they do a lot of setup in a lot of ways. And, okay, I'm finally going to get to spoilers here. Oh, how long I've been recording this. But, so what happens is, Carol's mentor, sort of ends up, so Carol's mentor is a Kree. She was an undercover Kree agent, who on Earth was developing a light-speed engine. And as such, the Earth sort of became a focal point between the Kree and the Skrulls. And Carol was sort of inadvertently involved in this. She was in the Air Force, and you know, she volunteered to basically test out this engine, sort of not knowing where everything came from was. And this is sort of what, and this is where the mystery builds up to, because as it turns out, Carol's mentor, Marvel, get it? Marvel. Oh boy. She, I believe, is played by Annette Bening. Yeah, she's played by Annette Bening. She's not in the movie a lot, and it's kind of hard to, like, get a grasp on sort of her character, because she's mostly a flashback character. She ends up dying after this engine crashed. And the big spoiler is that Marvel, or Wendy Lawson, that's her Earth name, it turns out she was working for the Skrulls, and that's because they actually just want to get away from the Kree. They don't want to be under their command. So Marvel just sort of helps them try to get away from the Kree, but because she died, that sort of work goes unfinished. And what happens is Carol shoots down the Lightspeed engine, and she ends up absorbing like all its power, and also loses her memory, and that's why she gets taken back to the Kree homeworld. I know it's stupid comic book stuff, and it sort of builds up to this big moment here, but it also comes across as sort of a so what kind of moment, because there's really not a lot of emotional weight attached to it. Carol doesn't really have a lot of conflicting feelings, about sort of what happened. She spent, 6 years or so working for the Kree, but yet when they find out that they're basically the bad guys, she doesn't have any qualms like switching sides. And it feels very hasten. It feels very too fast for what it is. And I was expecting another twist on top of it where, oh no, the Skrulls are actually the bad guys, but also the Kree. And Carol, basically in the center, just has to stop both, but they end up not doing that. The Skrulls end up becoming allies, like, super fast, even though they kill people and, are considered terrorists. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense plot-wise. And quite frankly, I think at that point, that's sort of where the stumbling block is. Now, the Skrulls themselves, specifically the character of Talos, he's played by Ben Mendelsohn. He's really good. He is funny. He's super cool, very witty. And you eventually go on to care about him. But at the same time, the fact that they do this, the twist seems so obvious, but yet everything about it just feels sort of not put together in the way it probably should have been. That part of the plot feels very underbaked in a lot of ways, and I feel like it could have benefited from at least another sort of twist to it, but I don't know. I wasn't the screenwriter. In fact, I wasn't one of the 3 screenwriters attached to this. Oh well. So that kind of brings me to Carol herself, and I think we'll start with the good. Brie Larson really brings it in terms of the look. Marvel has not let me down in terms of casting, and especially the way they embody these characters. And in a lot of ways, Brie Larson brings a lot of that. But at the same time, though, it's sort of hard to get a grasp as to what her character really is. She's basically a combination of a lot of aspects between Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. Those are definitely feels like the big two they sort of draw elements from. So she's sort of snarky like Tony, but also very heroic like Steve. And the movie never really bothers to find her own middle ground. So what we get is this weird combination between Tony and Steve, who also happens to be the most powerful being in the universe, or at least that's what's implied. And it'll be interesting to see how the sequels sort of bring to the table in terms of our character. Because there's a lot of possibilities as to where this movie is where the series can go. Like Captain America, Captain America 1 and then 2 and 3 were vastly different movies, same as the Iron Man movies. Those solo films ended up finding their footing after the first movie. And I'm hoping Captain Marvel does the same, and I feel like that'll mostly come down to who's directing. Because I think Bowden and Fleck really don't get how to do a superhero blockbuster movie. That feels very much out of their scope. So a lot of the action heavy scenes don't like have the grandiose that it should be. And also the CGI in certain places is not good. There are some parts, especially in space with zero gravity, that feels very much rushed. And the ending as well feels like it was supposed to be different. Because, so I'm going to spoil the ending. Fuck it. I'm going to put spoiler in the title. Watch the movie. I mean, I feel like if you're invested in the MCU, you should watch the movie. You're probably going to. And I think it's definitely well worth a watch, in my opinion, much like pretty much all of the MCU. But the movie itself ends with Captain Marvel just going away. She escorts the Skrull refugees that were in Marvel's ship in orbit on Earth that was cloaked. She just escorts those guys away, and what happened to her in 25 years, I don't know. But she gives Nick Fury the pager that was in the end of Infinity War that she paged her with. And she just leaves and ends up not coming back. So my problem with that is I don't want to do the whole this causes a plot hole, but it's weird that Fury never bothered with her, even though serious shit was going down on Earth that they probably needed Captain Marvel for. Especially during the Avengers. I feel like Captain Marvel was supposed to be a Phase 1 movie, and that just ended up being cut. And then they really only got around to it by Phase 3. And, the movie itself, the first mid-credit scene is basically the Avengers, the rest of the surviving Avengers, basically try to figure out what's up with this pager that Fury left behind. And Captain Marvel just shows up unaged with a slightly different costume. And I don't know. It certainly feels like something else was supposed to happen here. Because, it doesn't make sense that, she would just be doing something else without Fury, acknowledging that she met her or something like that. But yeah. I feel like I'm harder on this movie, and I don't want to be. Because this movie has been used by a lot of people sort of acting on bad faith here. A lot of idiots accusing this movie of being feminist propaganda or whatever, and it's not. Fuck, if you didn't think Wonder Woman was, this movie's not any better or worse at that. But I definitely do want to see more of Captain Marvel, especially sort of how Brie Larson and Feige, and hopefully with a different director, sort of find the footing here. And I'm looking forward to sequels, because I don't think Guardians of the Galaxy is happening anytime soon, or if it does, it's not going to be in a way I like because Disney did a bullshit to James Gunn. So I'm hoping Captain Marvel like actually becomes, sort of ends up being like the big space opera series of the MCU, and I would not mind that. I think there's a lot of potential here. It's just we gotta wait to see it realize some more. And yeah, that's all I really have to say. It's been going on for 30 minutes. God damn, I gotta cut this.